Hi, hello. Hi, Martha. How you doing? Hello, Bogna. Hello, everybody. Hello, Joanna. I can see.
Buongiorno, buongiorno.
Buongiorno o buonasera qui in Italia. How is everybody doing?
Buongiorno, buongiorno Mario. We are
Buonasera,
doing
buonasera.
fine. Come stai? Come
Tutto
stai?
bene, tutto bene. Benvenuti. So we are ready to start this is the fourth episode of Tutto Raffaello. So next Sunday will be the last one. Hello, Mike. I can see. Hello, Bill. I can see. Hello, John. I can see there's almost everybody here. And so, without any further ado, welcome everybody again. We start the fourth episode. Last time we finished last Sunday with the portrait of La Velata, and we saw the first 4 years, 5 years of Raphael living and working in Rome for the Pope Julius II. Julius II died at the beginning of 1513, and his successor was another pope of a different family. In this case, the Medici family. The Medici were rivals of the della Rovere, but nonetheless, the Medici, especially Giovanni Medici, was Lorenzo il Magnifico son. Of course, he had a deep understanding of art and the value of art and culture. So he kept Raffaello working and got him even busier. Now, last time we saw some of the paintings he made 1510, 1513, 1514, but in 15 around 1512, we don't know exactly when. Raphael got to work for a very famous banker who was also the Pope's Julius' best friend, and also his one of his best friends, and also his banker. So I don't know how the friendship worked, but anyway, Agostino Chigi was originally from Siena. Most bankers in Europe at the time were actually from Tuscany. And so from Lucca, from Siena, from Florence, the the Pucci, the Medici, the Strozzi, the Chigi. There were several families involved with banking, and they made huge loans to other European kings, like the King of England, the King of France. So they were very, very wealthy. And Agostino Chigi was the main banker of the Pope. Now, that's something so people who work in banking know this, but most people don't realize that really banks since the Middle Ages have been fundamental to the political and military and religious structure, because um, kings and governments, they rely on the taxes, but they have to plan their spending beforehand, and they have to pay all the clerks, they have to pay especially the armies, and so they need, especially if there's a war going on. Of course, the result of the war will only come a few years after the end of the war. Sometimes certain wars lasted decades. So, and that's where the bank was crucial to lend money, to pay the soldiers, to pay the armies, and also to make sure that the crown or the lords or the kings or whatever state it was could carry on its operations, pretty much like happens today. But of course, uh, we don't really think about that every day, but it's very important. And of course, bankers made a lot of money by doing that. And they invested much of this money in a way to partially kind of compensate for their activity, which included giving money for interest, which the baseline was the church considered that immoral. And so, in order to kind of repent or wash away that aspect of their lending, they basically sponsor a lot of chapels, lots of arts, lots of constructions in the religious sector, starting from their own burials and churches and other donations that they made to the church. So the church then considered they took them off the board of the bad guys and put them on the board of the good guys, and similar things like happen in history all the time. But then they had so much money they could spend also on the extra money on themselves, and that's what Agostino Chigi did. And Agostino bought a property in Rome, a large part of the riverside, south in the south western part of the city, and built there a fantastic villa, which was built by an architect from Siena as well, which was Baldassare Peruzzi. Peruzzi was very close to Raphael, so that's how Raphael got involved. And this image that you see in this Galatea, this fresco, was painted around 1512. The villa was then just finished. And then in the years after, Raphael continued working there. He also painted the famous loggia there. Now, the loggia was finished in 1518, 1519, and that was interrupted, only to be finished about a century later. We don't know exactly why, but there could be. Both Raphael and Agostino died in the same year, 1520. So, or Agostino died the year after. But anyway, they died while this decoration was still ongoing. Anyway, for narrative reasons, I will talk about this loggia now. And although we are still at the beginning of the decade, we are now between 1512, 1513. So Raphael is very busy with the Vatican Loggia, I'm sorry, not with the Vatican Loggia, with the rooms built by the Pope, the rooms of Raphael, the apartments of the Pope in the Vatican. That gives it an incredible visibility because, of course, everybody is it's like a rock star now. Everybody who wants a portrait or want a chapel or want something beautiful, well, they want that from him. And there's also other artists but Michelangelo, after finishing the ceiling, leaves Rome, doesn't really like Rome in this time, especially with the Pope Medici. He loved so much Lorenzo Magnifico that he started to hate so much the Medici afterwards he died. And so he went to Florence, was involved with the Republic. It was then, not really, he had a very difficult relationship with Pope Julius. So he will only return to Rome some 2 decades later for and then after that he never left. Anyway, so Raphael is kind of the greatest artist present in Rome from 1512 onwards, and there's several other gifted artists, but he's of course young. He has a very good team of artists who work with him, and he can deliver a lot of works in a relatively small time. He's also started to appreciate and be involved a lot more into the ancient Roman statues, into the classical antiquity. He has a fascination for ancient Rome. And you could see that very well in this beautiful fresco, where we have a story from the Metamorphosis, which is Galatea, which was this nymph. Nymphs were like demi-goddesses of the waters, and they were she was loved by Polyphemus, who actually killed Acha, which was the lover of Galatea. So it's like a tragic story, as very often classical love stories are. There's always like a tragic end to them. So ends doesn't normally ends well in in mythology and classical. And this has it's rooted in the mentality, in the philosophy that any so in the human soul has two basic kind of a main baselines. One is the rational aspect, and the other one is the irrational, the passions. And this is described very well, for example, by Plato. But especially the Stoic philosophers, they recommended that you control your passions and you follow your reasoning and you follow philosophy in order to make decisions in your life, and you don't follow your passions because they take you to stupid things. And and that's all these stories, all this mythology largely reflects that. And this was also something that was then somehow good for the church to use, because of course church teaches us to control ourselves and to obey certain commandments and basically prefer religious love over more earthly loves and so on. Anyway, the protagonist in this story, it's a beautiful woman, and there was a beautiful woman in the heart of Agostino Chigi, Francesca Ordeaschi. She was not a noble. She was considered a courtesan. Courtesans were like sort of they were the Renaissance equivalent of a geisha. They were not just kind of prostitutes. They were also cultivated. They were also, they can have a conversation. They were a kind of more rounded figures, and they were not just like somebody who you call to spend the night or evening. They were more like companions, and they provide also entertainment. Of course, they were not married, and they were the kind of ladies that largely entertain men in the Renaissance, and for what matters also much later. This beautiful building is the Villa Farnesina. Again, the architect was Peruzzi, and it's just along the river Tiber in Trastevere area. I do have, I don't have, sorry, the Google Earth. Google Earth, so we can see. No, I want Google Earth to see where that is. And we are in Rome already. Okay, so you see where the river makes a bend and then past the Vatican. Oh, it's the other way around. Yeah, sorry. So past the Vatican here, makes this large bend, and then around here, that's Trastevere. And right here, right this part, there is the Villa Farnesina, which is this fantastic construction. Is right here. At that time, he had also, there wasn't the road, there was just the shore. So he just had a private part of the beach. And in this area, it was where they believed Cleopatra was host of Giulio Caesar. There was the Orti Cesare. There was this the Orti di Cesare. There were these gardens supposedly owned by Julius Caesar, and of a large part of a large villa. Roman ruins and Roman villas have been found on the ground in this area, and the fragments are in the Archaeological Museum in Rome, the Palazzo Massimo. The villa was a concept basically of a leisurely building as opposed to the palace. Palazzo Chigi is in the central Rome, is where now there is the Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia, the first ever female Prime Minister Italy has ever had. And the villa was a place for leisure, for music, for art, for culture, and for love. And so, of course, Raphael was particularly well, versed. It was probably the right guy for this type of fresco. Now, the villa has two lodges. The one on the side towards the river, which is this one here, was the first one to be painted, and by the Peruzzi and few other painters. So Peruzzi, the architect, was also a painter and also created part of its decoration with the kind of these classical elements. And later on, then these were kind of closed, and some landscapes were painted. Anyway, the original project of the loggia also was unfinished, because this landscape that you see here at the bottom were finished later. In the center, on the top, there is the horoscope of Agostino Chigi, and there's a very complex mythological description of there's all paired planets and symbols, and they all represent, well, where the zodiac symbol is in the house of a specific planet. So, for example, Cancer here was in Mercury, and the other one, Libra, was in Mars, and so on. And so it depicts a very precise, very accurate date, which is the birth date of Agostino Chigi. Can't remember the exact date, year was the November day November in the 1400s, late 1400s, and the whole design meant that basically sorry, I went out. Sorry, I've lost it. I have to go back. The whole design basically meant that he was born under good stars, basically. And then there's also some other mythological scenes from the Metamorphosis. Now, these were not painted by Raphael, but they are very similar to the kind of idea of using classical antiquity and mythology to celebrate contemporaries. And here stands the beautiful fresco of Galatea with the Polyphemus here, the giant cyclops that is looking at the scene and then throw a giant bollard to kill, basically a giant rock to kill Arche. And then although we have the giant here, which is of course is not loved back, but we have a beautiful celebration of Galatea that attracts love with this flying cherub with the arches and all these sea creatures. Now, before we go on seeing more details the fresco, there is one of these lunette, they're called little like half moons. They are basically, because they have semicircular kind of archways. There is a black and white portrait of a head, and there's a story that says that basically this was made by Michelangelo, who wanted to compete with Raphael. We don't know if it's by Michelangelo, was probably not. Probably it's by Sebastiano del Piombo or by another artist. Sebastiano del Piombo is the painter, was a friend of Michelangelo actually, who painted the Cyclops over here. So there were several different artists to work on this loggia at first, also because the artist, it was both the idea to have more artists working in the same place, and also these are some of the rooms which are painted later on. I'm going to the loggia now. I'll show you the loggia. And that was probably left unfinished, and then they decided to leave it like that. Now, the other loggia is the one parallel to the, so facing the garden, parallel to the river, and these are glasses windows that were added later, but originally they were all open. And the loggia was supposed to be kind of prosecution of the gardens. So you would pass from the gardens into an indoor kind of loggia, which had plants and fruits and other stuff painted on, so give you the impression that we're halfway through. This is some of the sketches of the villa, and this is how the loggia is. So the loggia is between these two protruding parts, and this is the garden here. The river you see on the side, and that's the Sala di Galatea. Now, that's the Galatea next to the Cyclops image. You can see the very different style. Sebastiano Piombo was a Venetian. And then you can see that the giant is looking over there, and then Galatea is looking back. So there is a connection between the two stories. And then you have Galatea in all this beauty, surrounded by this, she's on a shell pulled by dolphins. There's cherubs. There's a scene which today will look like a groping scene. There's this man here holding another nymph. It's a celebration of love, also in the more physical aspect. And as I just said, Agostino Chigi had a lover called Francesco de Aschi, which she was not noble, but eventually the Pope gave permission, of course, after payment of some sum, to marry her. So the villa also became the celebration of this love, which goes beyond the social limitations, which in the beginning of 1500 was really a big deal. And you could see that the figure is very elegant, and it has this kind of the hair moved by the wind, and she's like riding, and she's half naked. There's this idea of freedom and celebration on nature and beauty. So this is something that you will find much later as a sort of a celebration of libertinism, which is something that we know Raphael really practiced. Giorgio Vasari told that the first thing he tells about us about Raphael is that he loved women so much and he was loved back and he enjoyed that very much and never got married. Here you see the three cherubs. Here there's another little one up here on the left. Raphael played a lot with this little puttini, and this is something that he also learned in Florence. These are similar to the Spiritelli by Donatello. There's little cheeky angels that look like almost pagan little figures. And all the three of them are all pointing through Galatea, which is far below. It's a perfectly composed scene. And here you could see that he really started to get into the complexity of the figure design that he saw in the Michelangelo's frescoes, but he also saw in a lot of statues that he started to see in Rome. And at this, to these ends, Vasari says, I'll read that later about Raphael and Michelangelo. Now, around 1518, I think, of like a few years later, 5 or 6 years later, Raphael went back to the loggia, and although this is one of his last works, although he was still first doing the rooms in the Vatican, I would like to talk about it here because it makes more sense to talk about that now than later. But yes, it's considered the last work by Raphael, and I think it's interesting also to see what his working room led him to. Yeah, between 1517 and 1519. Anyway, this is the other loggia that has the banquets of the gods and the myth of love and Psyche. Psyche was this beautiful girl. Psyche in Greek means soul, and it's an allegory, of course. And this story is told by in the Metamorphosis of the of Apuleius, which was a Latin author. It's also it's usually it's called the Golden Ass. This novel is the only novel from the ancient times that, as you know, it has arrived intact to us. And here there's this story about Psyche, which was basically pretty much in love with Eros, the god himself of love. She was a beautiful woman, and she one night was reached by this, beautiful man, which was Eros in disguise, and he basically they fell in love, but he made a promise not to reveal his identity ever. And one night, with the light, she was trying to look at him better, and the oil burned him, and she woke up. And then after that, she had to pass a number of tests in order to demonstrate that she was worthy of sitting on the throne with the gods. The main meaning of the story is like love is the fundamental transformational force in the universe, and through love we grow and become different people, and we possibly better people. I don't know if any of the married couples that have been for a long time together, they see themselves in that or not. Maybe, I don't know if it works or not. But the idea was basically that love makes you doing incredible things that no other things will make you do. And there's a higher part and a lower part. The lower part only has niches painted, which were made in the 17th century. And probably there was an idea of making these scenes here that you see above the windows being basically we can go into the other loggia now, maybe. The story was divided into episodes that took place of the story on Earth, on the underground and on the underworld, and others that took place in the sky, in the heavens. So the ones in the heavens were all painted here, and then the ones underneath, for which we have some drawings, Raphael planned them, they never got painted. They never got painted because Raphael died at the beginning of 1520, and also Agostino Chigi died there. So this is something that was made much later. Also, the this green part here, they didn't go all the way down. Some of the bottom parts were painted. In Italian, these are called festoni, these garlands, basically. They were finished, they were painted much later. Anyway, it's very interesting to look at it from here, because you could see that the story goes all around. It starts from here and goes all around here. And there's some episodes missing that would have been here, but we know what they are because we know where the story comes from. And it's really, really incredible that also Raphael had included hundreds of different plants and species into the fresco, into this festone, into these garlands. And some of them, there are several that come from the New World, so that were not known in Europe up until in the the late 15th century, early 16th century, when the first descriptions and the first plans from the Americas came. So it's very, very interesting in this point. And this is the figure of Mercury, the messenger, which of course is fully naked. It has this beautiful figure. And there is a detail which is quite interesting, that on one hand he has the trumpet because he's announcing something. On the other one, he's pointing at I think it's like a zucchini or something that looks exactly like a manhood, like a male genitalia. I don't know a word, like a willy. I don't know how to say it politely. And of course, it's a celebration of love, also in the very physical aspect, in the aspect of fertility, and of course continuation of the family. And the top part of this element here kind of pushes into a fig, which in Italian is we used to describe the female genitalia. I'm not making this up. This is true. Like it's it's very accurate. It's very something that you do not expect in a fresco, something that you expect to see in a villa of somebody maybe like Berlusconi, but not in somebody like Agostino Chigi. Anyway, the story, as I said, let's get back to the digital part because we can see it better there. So the story starts from here, where there is Venus showing to Eros, her son. You see that woman over there, she's beautiful and she's making everybody falling in love. She kind of overshadows me, like a bit of the story of the Snow White story, the evil witch or something. So jealousy, and then he goes there and she's really so beautiful. He falls in love with her, and eventually, this Hero's telling that to the three graces, this figure of the goddesses of ideal beauty as well, and a few other elements. You see, they are between the figures with these beautiful nudes. You see cherubs. They holding objects that are symbol of different gods. This is Hades here with the Cerberus with three-headed dog and the hook of Hades. Here we have Venus with Juno and Ceres, and then we have Mars with the shield and the sword, of course, attributes of Mars. Then we have Venus flying here to Jupiter, and you can see that Jupiter in this case, and she looks instantly younger in front of a of the father of the gods, in front of the king of the gods, which is there, to just looking for advice. And there are other episodes of the story which took place on Earth, or even in the undergrounds, in the Hades. But they're not depicted there because, as I said, they were never finished, but they were for surely planned. Then Mercury then announces that she finally has managed to get back. So she had to find certain objects. She had to get the water from one of the rivers in hell, and she managed to do all that. And then eventually he is presenting this to Juno, and oh no, this is sorry, to Venus, and then of course she was then allowed to dine with the gods. And there is also this representation of love where we have Eros kissed on the lips by by Zeus, and this is um, a subject of course, of reference to the what was called the Greek love as well. So it's basically a holy celebration of love in this sense. And then we have Mercury again, who's finally leading her to the banquet of the gods. So here we have the Psyche is the first one on the left. You can see that before going among the gods, she kind of shy, she covers herself. Then after she went back in the gods, which is basically sort of a nudist place, everybody's naked, and you could see that she's not shy anymore. She's there showing herself. And then there's Mercury again, the messenger, welcoming her. There's a little cherub, a symbol of love, holding her. Hera sits here with Venus behind him, and then there are Zeus and Poseidon, Hades, and all the other gods around here. It's very, very beautiful representation of the gods. And finally, after the marriage, and the fact that she's accepted among the gods, that's the banquet, which was something that they would have had in the villa. So it's also a conversational piece, as they dine in the heavens, the gods, we will dine here today. And there's an abundance, of course, of nudity, and there's an abundance of wine as well, and this celebration of love as the fundamental transformational force in the universe. And that was happening, that what happened in their life, because of course this was made to celebrate the actual marriage of a wealthy banker and a noble with just a commoner. And so in this sense, in this light, is a very, very beautiful piece. You could see here some of this picture, you could see better the details. Really, the fact that love is also the original life is reflected in the variety and the beauty of all these plants and all these fruits and all these flowers. These are some of the sketches that were made. There's also one where we have that was basically uh, not painted, so we know that the drawings at least were made for the paintings when were not completed. Now, at this time, Agostino Chigi, so between the Galatea, the first fresco, and the Loggia, which, as I said, was left unfinished, Raphael made a few other things, many of them also for Agostino Chigi, which loved him very much. One of them was the Cappella Chigi in Santa Maria del Popolo, and also he decorated another chapel in another church of Rome that I'm about to show you now. It's this one with sibyls and prophets. And I'd like you to read a little passage from the Vite by Vasari. I read in Italian, then I translate. Aveva acquistato in Roma Raffaello in questi tempi molta fama. So Raphael at this time in Rome he became very famous. Ed ancora che egli avesse la maniera gentile da ognuno tenuta bellissima, con tutto che egli avesse veduto tanti anticaglie in quella città e che egli studiasse continuamente, non aveva però questo dato ancora alle sue figure una certa grandezza e maestà che diede da loro qui in avanti. So even though he had been seeing ancient statues, Roman statues for quite a while, he still had retained his graceful style. La maniera gentile is the style of Perugino that we saw, that kind of idolized style. And he hadn't acquired yet the scale and that kind of my styles, like the majesty, those imposing and sculptural figures that then he started to have from here onwards, starting with these ones, but also with a few more, especially the loggia that we saw now. Perché divenne in questo tempo che Michele Agnolo, so a this time Michelangelo, fece al Papa nella cappella quel rumore e paura, come diremo nella vita sua, onde fu forzato a fuggirsi a Fiorenza, per il che, avendo Bramante la chiave della cappella, a Raffaello come amico lo fece vedere, a ciò che in modi Michelangelo comprendere potesse. So here it mentions Michelangelo, and he says, as I will tell in the life of Michelangelo is the last life in this book. Michelangelo was painting the ceiling of a Sistine Chapel. He had almost finished one half. And then the Pope Julius, went to see how the fresco was coming. This must have been around 1510 or 1511. and so I think in the summer of 1510. And Michelangelo threw down some beams from a scaffolding, nearly killed the Pope. He made big noise, and the Pope was very upset because, of course, Michelangelo didn't want to be disturbed while he was creating. And then Michelangelo then left, and he spent, I think, 8 to 10 months away from Rome, between painting one half and the second half of the Sistine Chapel. We know that it was interrupted. The reason for that being interrupted is that they had to take down the scaffolding and rebuilding on the other time. So there were anyway a few weeks or probably a few months in that. Plus, the Pope was not in Rome at the time, was in Bologna fighting. So Michelangelo was waiting to see if the Pope had died in battle, had money to pay him. Michelangelo was not one of those artists. Like, we have this idea of the artists that they really have to complete the masterpiece and the work because that's what they live for. No, that was their job. They did that because they get paid for doing it. Of course, they did it in a creative way. They honestly felt that there was something that they were, making also for themselves. But they created something for someone else because it was their way of living. And so Michelangelo would have not finished the Sistine Chapel if the Pope would have died or if it was not paid, as it happened, for example, for the tomb of the Pope that he never finished because the Pope never paid him. And that happened a lot of times. There's a lot of unfinished Da Vinci paintings. There's a very famous one in the Uffizi, the Nativity. And that one was because when it was the time for Michelangelo from Leonardo to get paid, the father said, "Oh, you know what, Master Leonardo, there's that guy that owns us money. Why don't you go and ask him the money that we owe you?" And Leonardo said, "You know what? You give me the money or I don't finish the job." And so it was never finished. So artists had very, ordinary problems, like, they had to pay rent, they had to pay food and live and that kind of stuff. Anyway, here, Vasari said Michelangelo had left, and Donato Bramante was the chief architect of the Vatican City at that time. He had the keys of the chapel, and so let Raphael as a friend to see the fresco before they were finished, with Michelangelo being absent. Michelangelo learned that afterwards. He was furious, and he later on said, "Anything that Raphael is good in his art, he has stolen it from me, he is learning from me." Here we could see that some of the symbols, some of the figures that were painted in this chapel in Rome, they're very similar to the Sistine Chapel. The gestures, the torso, the old figures twisting. You see, they're sitting in one way and turning around. They're draping above their heads. It's really all elements that he saw in the Sistine Chapel and said, "Oh, this is good. I have to use this in my work." And this was the Cappella di Santa Maria della Pace near Piazza Navona, behind Piazza Navona in Rome. It's here. It's a beautiful church. Was built in the Renaissance and then refurbished in the 17th century. So it was built by Bramante, and then it was that's where Bramante Cloister also is, and it was then refurbished in the 17th century by Pietro da Cortona, an artist who worked at the same time with Bernini. This is the beautiful octagonal dome. It's a very nice church. It's a small church. And whoops. And here, as you enter here on the right above, there's the fresco just showed you. And you see the chapel doesn't have really much space because it's very small. There's this little kind of narrow corridor and then gets into these octagonal rooms. It's really a small church, but it's very beautiful. And these frescoes are really, really, a sample of. Now the picture. This is the picture before they were restored. They have been restored 5 years ago, by Antonio Forcellino, the same author of this biography of Raphael. This was written a few years ago, 5 years ago, and he also actually restored. So a few years back, if you enter that church, you could see this man up on the scaffolding, kind of cleaning the frescoes. And here you can see these figures of sibyls and angels. And the sibyls were, the prophetesses of the pagans, of the Romans and the Greeks. And of course, with the angels, there was the way to represent that Greek and Roman philosophy. They kind of had elements of truth even before the revelation, even before Jesus Christ, even before that, because there's some of that was divine inspired, and it was the Renaissance main task or duty to put in accordance the classical mythology and philosophy and science with the biblical and religious teachings. And this is how visually they represented it. And you can see feature that elements, certain physical features of figures, they are pretty Raphaelesque, like the angel here, this figure here, that looks very Raphaelesque. But you see, she has a bigger arm. This draping on the head of this other one, the position of the legs. These are elements that come from Michelangelo that they were not present in Raphael before Raphael came to Rome, before uh, he saw the ceiling of the chapel. And so this again, 1512 to 1514. So this was after the Sistine Chapel was visible to the to the to the public. And so yeah, I don't read now more of the more about this, but for example, later on, Vasari says, era in questo tempo a Roma Agostino Chigi, mercante senese ricchissimo, extremely rich, call him a merchant, in the truth, he was a banker. And here, these are some of the sketches, some of the drawings. Here you can see the drawings. It's not exactly the same, but it's very similar in the positioning. And then here, this other figure, this is actually the sketch for the same figure. Now, there's another figure. It's this prophet Isaiah, which was painted on a pillar in another church. The church of Sant'Agostino is a church that also features the Madonna dei Pellegrini di Caravaggio. And you can see here, there's this beautiful statuary figure, this big legs, and then the muscular structure is very imposing. And again, the draping is very dramatic. And this is placed, where is it? I'll show you now where it is. It's placed in, no, this is Cappella Chigi. Let's go to Sant'Agostino. Sant'Agostino in Campomarzio. Yes. Un po'. It's up. Where is it? No. I thought I had it, but I think it's the scaffolding in front of it. I can't say it now. Oh, it's here. There it is. Okay, so this is this is the nave of the church, Sant'Agostino. Down here in this chapel down there, there's a Caravaggio, and then here there is this monument. This is a tomb. The statue was made by Jacopo Sansovino, which was another Florentine sculptor, and another. It was close to Michelangelo as well. And then above there is this fresco here with Isaiah, and it's the one I showed you. Now let me show you here, and then you can see those features that basically Vasari was describing. And this is the sculpture by Sansovino, but very Michelangelo-esque in many elements. Jacopo Sansovino later on left Rome in the 1520s, and he went to Venice to work. Another church, the Basilica of Santa Maria del Popolo, which is a very important church, and it features several masterpieces, also Caravaggio's there as well. Also has a chapel which was designed by Raphael. Raphael here acts mostly as an architect. There aren't any of these paintings here, although the execution was not by himself, but the ideation of the frescoes probably by himself. And so it's the first one of the first architectural projects by Raphael. Raphael worked also from 1515 onwards. He worked as an architect as well for the Basilica of St. Peter, and hence because of that also got other jobs in designing other palaces. All this we'll see that next time. Unfortunately, most of the things that Raphael built did not last or survive. They've been destroyed, especially in the last century. But there are several. John says currently under restoration. I have to be honest, I haven't been there for a while, but let's go to Santa Maria del Popolo. I think it was under restoration. I'm not sure if it's still or not. I can let you know next week. I can pop in and see what it if they I haven't been there for a while. There's also another thing that the current priest that runs the church doesn't really like tours or people going in there at all. They're not very welcoming. Let's see. This is the Cappella Chigi here. Now I want to go to Google Earth. So Piazza del Popolo, it's on a total different part of Rome. We are right here. I always put it upside down. Near Piazza del Popolo, and it's right there. So this chapel is right here. Let's see, in the church, and then we get to see the church was again, it was made in the Renaissance, and then it was refurbished, redecorated. The 17th century. This picture is not the best. Oh, that's a concert here. And so there's several chapels with several artworks, but the main, the one that interests us is the Cappella Chigi here, which was completed in the 17th century again by Gian Lorenzo Bernini, so another great architect and artist. And the conception, though, it's by Raphael. You can see it's very harmonious, and again, it prefers the round shape versus the square or the rectangular, and like a sort of a temple, and it has the beautiful dome. And so you can see that the idea here, he kind of designed and built like a mini St. Peter's. It was probably his way to show that he could do St. Peter's, which was the greatest job probably in the world at that time, which took over 100 years in the making. And in 1515 he was appointed. He had an honorific title, which is the Scriba Pontificio. It was sort of a papal secretariat, which it didn't involve any practical activity. It was just connected with the working for the Pope, and then it was provided a wage, which provided him a large security. And when we think about the Renaissance artists, painters, even like gifted artists like Michelangelo or Leonardo, they were considered artisans. They were not considered intellectuals. Still in the Renaissance, the painter who painted the White Room or an artist who made a fresco, socially they were considered the same. They were still working with their hands. They were still making something. The painters and the architects, maybe more intellectual stuff. For example, the sculptures. This was the criticism that Leonardo made of Michelangelo. And of course, for Michelangelo, which was from a noble family, was a bit kind of a downsizing or downgrading, um, getting into a craft. And that's why he struggled all his life to get this kind of recognition. But once the artist got a title, which could be a knighthood or it could be some appointments like this one I mentioned about Raphael, they became something different. They became intellectuals and they acted as some because they didn't have to work the hours to produce something to get paid. It wasn't considered then, a sort of need what they did anymore, even though if it was in the end. The chapel, which featured large Renaissance frescoes, and there's the Godfather at the top in the beautiful dome, and these large pyramids. The pyramids were added later that represent the burials of the Chigi. and the statues of four prophets with angels and other figures. This is Jonas, I think. This is by one of the artists which worked with Raphael, which was Lorenzetto. Now, I have the pictures here. Then you can see the dome is very beautiful. And then you can see Goffa. This is a mosaic at the top, and it's by Salviati, which was an artist of this early decades of 1500. And you could see the angels and the other figures on the top. That's the original sketch from for the painting. And in this years, Raphael also made a number of beautiful paintings with the Vatican rooms ongoing. And as I said, in 1513, it was a big change with the Pope Medici. Now, this painting, it's really one of the most beautiful paintings of this time, and it's very innovative. Till now, we've seen that usually there's a Virgin Mary, Holy Family, and then the saints are all basically put around the figure like in a semicircular way or on one or two lines, very parallel. This is completely asymmetric. You have Saint Jerome on the right, and on the left you have Tobias and the angel. Now Tobias, how would you say in English, was basically in the Bible. He had his feet in the water, and then the fish tried to bite his foot, and so he was scared. And then the angel told him, "Oh, don't worry, grab it." And then use it. And then so he grabbed his fish and he gutted it and he ate half of it. And now in the Old Testament, very often the feet are an allegory of sexual organs. In fact, the angels that have 6 pairs of wings in front of the Lord, the one pair they used to fly, the other pair they adore the Lord, and the other pair they used to cover their feet, which doesn't make any sense, but it does if you consider that they meant something different. And I'm not making this up. I've read it, so I promise. and anyway, the symbol here is that because Tobias and later on he married and it's I had offsprings and all that, so it's a symbol of how sexuality can be a damnation because it leads you into a sinful life, but it can also be something more productive and well directed in this way. That's why he's offering the fish to the Virgin Mary. This was in a chapel in Naples in the Chiesa di San Domenico Maggiore for at least 100 years or so. So this was made in Rome. Raphael mostly lived in Rome, and he at this point he was based in Rome. When artworks were made for other places, we saw an artwork was made for Piacenza. There's another one coming made for Bologna. This for Naples. There's one made for Sicily. He actually made them in his workshop and then shipped them. So basically, they were made remotely, and so this was there for about 100 years up until the one of the Spanish kings of Naples decided to take him back to Spain with him when he left. It was an actual art looting, basically, and so it's today in the Prado Museum in Madrid, but in Edinburgh, in Scotland, the National Gallery of Scotland, there is this beautiful drawing by Raphael, which has the beautiful is the sketch for the same painting. So every painting that Raphael made started like this. Now, most artists in the Renaissance started like this. First, they would like do parts on the sketch, and then they will start with an idea. From this idea, the pupils, the collaborators will kind of prep the table, and the master would have probably started it off, and then the pupils would have carried out the work. Of course, in this case, Raphael did not paint it over in like 15 years. He didn't paint like over 100 paintings by himself, plus an endless number of square meters of thousands of square feet of fresco by himself. He had a workshop of people who work with him. So this is the Madonna of the Fish. So this was actually last year was back in Naples for a temporary exhibition. Then another Madonna of this time is the Madonna dell'Impannata. It's very beautiful as well. It has this this is a, so the Madonna we saw, I don't have it here. This is two, so the one before, the Madonna picture was 215 by 158. It was about 7 feet tall by 5 feet. While this one it's slightly smaller, and this was you could see that this is largely painted by the pupils. I mean, you could tell it's Raphael, but you can also tell that, especially the figure here on the right, and the baby, the face of the Virgin Mary, this is largely workshop hands. Another Madonna of this period is the Madonna della Tenda from Monaco, which is in Monaco now. This is Munich. The picture is not very, it's not this dark, it's just the picture is usually is a bit lighter. There's a green tent at the back, which is it's very, very interesting. And then you can see here the details. And the most famous Raphael artwork that we actually we don't have information about this painting from Vasari, although probably Vasari made a copy of this painting for himself, and we don't have many sources originally, but it became, especially in the 19th century, the most famous Raphael painting ever. This became kind of a sort of model for generation of artists in the 19th and 19th century and 20th century, mostly and largely because it's considered kind of the one of the apex of Raphael art, in which the beautiful Madonna represented in a very naturalistic way. Rumors said that this would have been like just a peasant or a Roman lady just used as a model, which probably was. But this very chubby, very realistic child with these large eyes, this very beautiful expression, the little St. John at the back, and then you have the chair here that you could see, and the Virgin Mary is taken from the side and she's looking sidewise. So it's a very intimate painting. There's also in the way she's dressed. She's dressed like a Roman lady of that time, or somebody you could see in the streets of that time. So basically, it very actual, and in the way it's represented, had some picturesque elements that enriches very much and make it very difficult. It also has very classical features. The face, it looks a lot like some of the statues. If you see the neck and the jaw and all that part there, the nose, everything is very similar to the statues of a Juno, a statue of a classical goddess. So it uniques, it unifies different elements of classicism, but also he had elements of naturalism and authenticity. That's why it was considered for centuries and for generations the standard of absolute excellence in art for centuries, up until basically the Impressionists, so up until the 19th century. This man here is Giovanni de' Medici, is the became cardinal. He was the son of Lorenzo Magnifico, who in 1513 became pope with the name of Leo X. And he decided to continue the decoration of the rooms, which were started by its predecessor, and he wanted to see finish, which it did not, but you know, that often happens. And so we saw the other day the other two rooms. This is called the room of the fire of Borgo. When you visit today, this is the last room that you see. It's the only room whose ceiling is not by Raphael. This was there before. This was made by Perugino, beginning of 1500 or late 1400. Yeah, beginning of 1500. And Perugino was Raphael's friend and was his master or early cooperator. And so, of course, he could not cover this. Also because Perugino was still alive. Perugino outlived Raphael. So here you could see 4 more scenes connected with the life of the church. First one is the Fire of Borgo in the Middle Ages under Pope Leo IV. So Pope Leo X decided to celebrate the other Pope Leos to celebrate himself. And Pope Leo III, there was Leone Magno, Leo the first in the early centuries. And Leo III and Leo IV was very important in the Middle Ages, when there were the barbarian invasions and the Franks. Now, because the Pope at that time was at war against France, and there were problems with the other European kings. This was the time known as the War of Italy, the Wars of Italy, which lasted about nearly 70 years, and really, brought a lot of destruction and tragedy to Italy for a long time. So he decided to celebrate the life of these other Pope Leos, and probably he chose that name just to refer to those episodes, hoping that he could solve all the troubles of Italy at that time. And so in the background we have the facade of the Basilica of St. Peter, how it looked like before the old one was destroyed and rebuilt. This facade was still standing when this was painted, was demolished years later. I think the 1530s was demolished. And because they started to demolish the part of the apse, and then the facade was left and used for a few years. I'm not sure exactly when it was demolished, but after 1530s. And then that's part of the Papal Palace at that time with the loggia. And the Pope, by blessing the fire that has started to destroy the suburb around the Vatican called Burg, because the German pilgrims used to call that Burg when they arrived the city. He just stopped the fire with just a blessing. The meaning is the Pope will protect its people and Rome from the complete destruction. But the fire of Borgo is not represented as a common fire. It's represented as the fire of Troy. And why does Raphael want to reconnect the city of Troy, the myth of Troy, with the Pope? What does it matter? Because Aeneas, which is this man here carrying his father on the shoulder and his son next to him, was the hero that then settled in Italy after traveling in the Mediterranean. And his descendants were basically Romulus and Remus that created Rome. So it's reconnected with the very regions and history of Rome. And you could see the outfit of the figures is incredible. Look at these figures here. There's another figure here, the naked hero running, a mother, so an element of drama, the mother tossing the child all wrapped in these bandages, which was the way in the Renaissance they would have wrapped babies. Up until, I think, the beginning of 20th century, babies were wrapped this way, wrapped with like little mummies, and about 20% of them died because of that. And then here you could see the Roman ladies, hands up and all gestures. It's very dramatic, but it's represented very beautifully. And there's always element of classicism. You see those vases, and the woman bringing these vases, this jar of waters on her head, and then these are the ones passing out the jars because probably they want to help stop the fire, but of course they're helpless, and it's the Pope, and of course ultimately the grace of God that kind of stops the fire. Children here, and again putti. Children look like putti here. You see little ones. Very, very. And here's Raphael mastered this kind of narrative that was the model for every fresco or painting or like a large historical scene, which he create really a canon how to tell a story that involves anything, and you want to add there some classicism, you want to have that a bit of drama. This is really a mastery storytelling in this sense, how it flows the scene beautifully, and it's all around. And as the Pope right in the center, so is the most important figure there because it's high up at the center in the loggia, people on their knees thanking him. So we have the before and the after and the moment. It's really the way in one old scene the artist was able to represent the entire story. It's really, really incredible. Another story is the Battle of Ostia, and off the coast of Rome. We have the ancestors of the Crusaders, basically, because this battle took place in think 900 something or 800 something. So in the 9th or 10th century, the Arabs were raiding the Italian coast. They settled in Sicily and they're trying to get to the Italian coast, and they also took possession of a few islands along the coast, like in Tuscany and so on. And so the Pope set up an army, and they defeated them right off the coast of Rome. And that is the Moors being chained and brought to the Pope, and the Pope again thanking God for the victory. And then later on, about a century later, they took the war to the Middle East. This is the oath of Pope Leo, which was, I think, Pope Leo the fourth or third, I'm not sure here, who made an oath that he was accused of misbehavior of some sort, mostly politically. And so he made an oath in which he said, I'm only answering to God for my action and not to you people, which is a very good way. So it was just a message to remind the fact that the Pope only answer to his call and not to other people. And it's one of the key elements of what was later on known as Cesaropapismo, fact that the popes, which started as spiritual leaders, then became like Caesars, like political leaders, and that they created sort of absolutism. And this is another important historical episode in the history of the church, which is the incoronation of Charlemagne as king of the Holy Roman Roman German Empire, the Holy Empire, the political entity that kind of was created by Charlemagne from the ashes of the Roman Empire in Central Europe, and which lasted about 1,000 years, because the Roman German Empire, or the Holy Empire, lasted up until so I think in Germany, in Central Europe, they call it the Holy Roman Empire, as opposed to the ancient Roman Empire. And in Italy, I think we call it the German Empire. But anyway, the Holy Roman German Empire. But it was this political entity which lasted from the 800 something up until from the 800, from the coronation of Charlemagne, up until 1850s, 1860, up to the creation of Germany. And so the emperor was this, political entity which controlled much of Central Europe, including northern Italy, and then at some point also Spain with the Habsburg. And here Charlemagne is represented with the facial features of the king Francis I, which was king at the time of France. And then here we have Pope Leo the 13th. It should be Pope Leo the third, but actually Leo the fourth, but it's actually Leo the 13th who has the his portrait there. And there's all the papal courts around and all other figures around. It's very, very complex. And the incoronation symbolizes the authority that the Pope has on every ruler, even the most important ruler, one of the most important rulers in history. And is a reminder, of course, to the enemies of the church at that time, that the church based its power on a mission from God, while the kings, yes, they derive their power from God, but in a less direct way. And especially this all is based on the work by St. Augustine, the philosopher, who stated that emperors and kings, they build the cities of men, but the church is working for the city of God, which will be our everlasting home after resurrection. So basically, it was an importance in the fact that the church works for the eternity, while the kings only work for a small time. And Charlemagne was incarnated in Rome in the Basilica of St. Peter on a Christmas night of 800 AD. And it was a political exchange, and the Pope had the Franks taking care of the Longobards who had invaded Italy and were threatening the church. Now, the medieval story of Italy is a story of several invasions, the Goths first, and then the Longobards, the Byzantines, the Longobards, the Arabs, the Franks. The Franks, they had a problem in France because the Merovingians and other dynasties were challenging their power. So with the support of the Pope, Charlemagne was able to take power control in France and eventually in Central Europe, and also to defeat the Arabs. And on the other side, it he made very strong the church as an institution and the papacy, the prestige of the Pope, of the Bishop of Rome. Charlemagne was also quite brutal when it came to choosing religion. In fact, the Saxons were slaughtered because they refused to convert to Christianity. Those who did were all killed and slaughtered. It's very famous, this element here. Now, this frescoes here of these rooms, they were painted between 1514 and 1517. And so it took him about a good 3 years. There was another large kind of set of another decorational cycle which was made in these years. These are the pictures of the same episodes I showed you, which were made for the Sistine Chapel. Now, the Sistine Chapel, there are, Botticelli, Perugino, all the greatest artists of the late 15th century, Michelangelo, but there's also Raphael. The only thing is that they don't show it normally, because Raphael is there through a set of 10 tapestries, which are still in the Vatican. They're in the painting, gallery. I'll show you them now. And these were woven between 1515 and they were finished by the end of 1521. They were made in Brussels by Peter van Elst with a loom by hand, based on the drawings that Raphael provided. The drawings there, they survived. We still have them, and it's incredible we do. Now, this is like the setting of when they have service and ceremonies with the Pope sitting on the side. That's why the Sistine Chapel has the stairs are quite uneven, because there's a placing the seating for the Pope on one end. And this is the painting gallery, which was built in 1930s just to host paintings and artworks. They are the paintings by Raphael. We already saw two of them. The last one is the Transfiguration here, which is the last painting by Raphael. And then there are these tapestries. Now, not only the tapestries have survived, and there are also several other copies, but also the cartoons, the drawings, which were made on paper and that were used to weave these tapestries. Now, the tapestries, they have the Acts of the Apostles, and they are currently, so they were sold and eventually they were acquired by the King of England, I believe already in the 16th century, and they were kept in the can't remember the name, in a royal palace in the southern part of London, and there was a gallery where they were displayed here, Hampton House, and there's Hampton Court, and there's an entire gallery which is built just to host these cartoons, these drawings. The drawings were not used as the actual ones using the looms, because when you transfer this drawing on a loom, basically you put the piece of paper and then you weave on top of it, you basically destroy the image doing that. So that's why they made copies of that, and then they used those that eventually was destroyed. These ones were kept like sort of a kind of a master to be making several copies, because they plan to make several series. In fact, there are at least 3 series of tapestries, and they were purchased by the King of England because he wanted to have a series woven for himself. Now, they are currently in London in the Victoria and Albert Museum, the drawings on paper. This is the gallery, how it looked in the 16th, 17th century. And these are the original cartoons that you could see. This is the calling of the disciples Peter and Andrew. And these are just gorgeous. They're beautiful, and also the colors are amazing. And the fact that they are on paper, and these are like all little sheets of paper all glued together. It's not even like a one big paper, and we call it cartoni, but they're not they're very thin eventually. And then here these were actually glued on canvas. Yeah, these are the tapestry. Now you see that the tapestry and the drawing, they are completely mirrored. It's like the negative and the positive. That's because when you put it in the loom to weave it, you weave the back side, not the front side. And so you put the image to look at, and then so the result is that the end product is mirrored. So Raphael had to draw thinking that this would the one on the left would be the end result, which is quite unique. Then this is the Feed My Sheep one, in which there are a number of disciples, Peter on his knees, and then of course there's the message. These are from the book of Acts, so they are basically episodes of the life of the apostles. It's the last part of the Bible. And this is the tapestry out of it. You can see that there are some difference. For example, the outfit of Christ here is quite basic, and here they added this gold and stuff. The gold and that's because this was a luxury object, so they had to use silk and they had to use gold and silver woven into it also because they wanted to charge a ridiculous amount of money for them. Now, this is the healing of the cripple with Peter in the center. The columns of the Temple of Solomon, of which they had one in Rome, so that's why the canopy of the Vatican has this shaped columns. And this is the cartoon. The cartoon is more clear here, you can see it better. And here is like again the apex of Raphael art. He kind of reaches this moment where the figures are so perfectly monumental, and the narrative is so complex, and yet it's so easy to understand. And you could see he was able, the gestures, everything is so perfect. Constant like citation also the antiquity, but the carvings on the columns, for example. This is the death of Anania. Then here again was lied to the Peter and Paul, which are here standing. And then here again we have a miracle of the blind, and here sacrifice at St. Paul. I think it is St. Paul in Greece. That's a preaching of Paul. And now this tapestry were hung like in the lower level of the Sistine Chapel. There's still hooks, and they've hung them once in 2005, 2006, no, maybe later, about 20 years ago or less than 20 years ago, was one of the first years of Ratzinger being Pope. And at that time, the British Prime Minister, I can't remember what it was, they made a deal, and so they kind of made a big exhibition with the cartoons and everything, and so they did that. And then they did again February 2020 for the 500 years anniversary of Raphael's death, which was not a great year, as you remember. So I don't think they're going to put them out ever again after that. There's one thing you do every 10, 15 years, and then that year is very bad here. You don't have to do that again. Now, with the tapestries, I just have a couple more paintings and portraits, and then next time we're going to see basically the last years and the legacy of Raphael, which is mostly made also of his other work as an architect, as an intellectual, and as someone who, for the first time, appreciated the antiquity in a way that we only came to appreciate probably in the 19th century. So in this is really ahead of his time in that sense. And so this is all elements that we'll see next time. But his interest in archaeology, and his interest in architecture and in general in preserving the antiquity, in preserving ancient Rome. Now, this gentleman here that you would see is Baldassare Castiglione, the author of The Courtesan. He was a very prominent intellectual in the court of Urbino at the time, sorry, Cortigiano, and the courtesan, yeah, Cortigiano, and 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 Urbino is the birthplace of Raphael, and he was, of course, very connected with the Montefeltro, and then with the Della Rovere. Baldassare Castiglione was then sent to Rome as an ambassador to the Pope. So when this portrait was made, he was in the charge as an ambassador in Rome. Of course, it was close to Raphael, and in his work, Cortegiano, Baldassare Castiglione describes the life in the court based on elements of uh, cultural and behavior in which male and female they act as equal, and there's a really an interesting kind of social behavior based on the rules and on the cultural enrichment of the court. So we see the court as a place of conspiracy and bad business in the back politics. But in his views, it was more a kind of a intellectual legacy. And Baldassare Castiglione was bold, and he was very shy of his boldness. There's something we know. He wrote a letter in which he's really complaining about his being bold. That's why he's wearing this fancy hat here. Of course, he was a very elegant man, very sophisticated, and you could see his very honest and clear look at us with his, 3/4 image. The only defect in this painting is that his hands are cut enough, for which they doubt that the hands were originally made in the painting, and they believe they were added later at some point, but they are part of the original painting. Another famous portrait is this one on Navagero and Beazzano, which were again two intellectuals, and Navagero created the first kind of small botanical garden in Venice, and it was very prominent figure in the Renaissance. Is also a portrait that represent friendship and intellectual friendship. So it's very interesting in that sense. It does show all the physical features of the two men, and it shows them with their outfits, with their shirts and everything. And this is also it will be kind of a model, portraits of 3/4 with this beautiful shading. They are also very important for the portraits made in the 17th and 16th and 17th century. This particular one, it's in Rome, in the Galleria Doria Pamphili, and it was made around 1516. And then for the Church of Bologna, the church, the one which is at the top outside in the outskirts of Bologna, around 1515, a chapel was built dedicated to Saint Cecilia, the patron saint of music. And there were several people devoted, including this lady called Dall'Olio. She's the one who sponsored the chapel, and so she was a very prominent figure in Bologna at that time. She was very devoted. She had visions, according to herself, of the virgins and saints, and she wrote a memoir. I think it was written around 1530, so a little later, in which she claimed that even though she married, she remained a virgin, like Saint Cecilia, which was forced into marriage, and then she chose virginity and then death through martyrdom. So, and it's quite peculiar thing. So, evidently it wasn't a happy marriage anyway. So you see the saint with the organ, the pipe organ there, and then on the floor there's a number of instruments, all kind of broken, and there's only one that she has in hand. It's a symbol allegory of the unique kind of type of um, message of Christianity, which is one way to please the Lord, one way to be in tune with the Lord, and which is in this case, of course, preserving their own purity and devote their life to religion, while entertainment and other aspects of life are looked down. It's not really in the cause of Raphael, but Raphael made a brilliant masterpiece out of that by bringing the other saints very close to Saint Cecilia. She's kind of isolated and she's looking up and in her thoughts, and you can see other saints around in the St. Paul on the left. So it's very dense, very, very beautiful. And you could see the instruments here at the back on the floor, like they all look cracked and old. So it's again this alternance between because Saint Cecilia, when she was martyred, when she was tortured, she sang beautifully to the Lord, and then that's why they kind of celebrated her for that. So there's an allegory in that. Another painting of this period is the Vision of Ezekiel. This is a teeny tiny painting. It's only where is it? It's only 40 centimeters by 29. It's just over. It's a foot and 3 inches by 1 foot. So it's very, very small. And so the Santa Cecilia before is now in a museum in Bologna in the Pinacoteca Nazionale, while this in the Palazzo Pitti is in the Uffizi. And it represents the vision of Ezekiel with these four figures, which later on were interpreted as the Gospels. You see the eagle, the flying bull, and the flying lion, and the angel. Very dramatic, very intense, but this god, which looks more like a Zeus, is very similar to the Zeus in the Loggia. It's very monumental figure. And then this, which is one of the most beautiful portraits by Raphael of the young Bindo Aldoviti, again, was a Florentine banker. This is in Washington, in the National Gallery in Washington, D.C. And the portrait of a man is very, very beautiful. You can see he has the hat called the Raffaella, and he has beautiful long flowing hair. You can see he's dressed very nicely. He has a ring on the other arm, and then is basically offering us his back and turning completely around. And this creates a beautiful effect. The shading on his face, the fact that we see half of him, it's representing the man who is still discovering himself. Raphael was in his early 30s, and then he was now an adult man, and he started to realize how, over the years, you start to discover more of yourself, more of the life. So it's just this man coming out and making kind of a, growing into an adult. I think it's a very beautiful representation of a young man with this shading, with this turning. You see half face, not the other half very well. It's very, very beautiful. And one of the closest, let me just check one thing. Yes, so we have this and another one. One of the closest patrons of the Raphael was the Cardinal Bernardo Dorizzi da Bibbiena. I showed you portraits of cardinals the other day. There was one, let me see, that was very similar. One was probably the Farnese, and one was, the Inghilterra. I think I showed you this already, but I have it here as well because it's on the same years. Sorry, let's go back. Because Bernardo Dorizia Bibbiena had a niece, Maria Bibbiena, and the poor thing was promised to Raphael. Raphael postponed the marriage several times up until she died and she was bitched. There's a plaque in the Pantheon next to his tomb. I'm looking for Vasari, but I might not have it here. Yes, it describes several portraits, not this one. Anyway, and we know that Raphael had very active life. He had several lovers and it was very busy. And in the 19th century or even later, this painting, which is in the Palazzo Barberini collection now, is a state-owned museum. Um, it was always, nicknamed as La Fornarina. Fornarina, it's actually a name that's only used starting from the 18th century, not before. And it's most likely not a Raphael girlfriend or a Raphael lover. Supposedly there was this Margherita Luti, which was the daughter of a baker, which lived next to the Villa Farnesina, which so he describes. I can't find the little, but Vasari again. He says that Raphael fell so much in love with this woman that he decided, because she was like, the bakery was like next door to the Villa Farnesina, and that's why basically Raphael loved to work there, because he could go and see the girlfriend. Vasari has this described somewhere, but I'm not sure where that is. And it's probably a nickname given later, because Fornarina was another way to describe a prostitute, because it symbolized the act of baking. So baking bread was a way to describe kind of code to describe prostitutes. And this is evidently not a prostitute. She has the name of Raphael around her an arm. She has the beautiful expression. She's nude, but this is a symbol. You see, this is the 18th century when it's one of the many etchings and drawings that represented the Fornarina. And she actually holds one breast, which is a symbol of being faithful to someone. And it is probably representation of someone else woman, possibly the Agostino Chigi or another one that was signed by Raphael, but doesn't mean that the woman is Raphael's woman. It's just a way to sign it. We saw in other paintings that Raphael signed some of the paintings in a similar way. And she has a turban with a pearl, so that's an element of uniqueness, an element of beauty, and also an element of wealth. And she has a beautiful figure. The figure is very beautifully represented. There's also, you don't see very well it here, but there's a juniper in the back, which was represented, which was a symbol of virtue. So, although it was described in a more, immoral way later on, it is a symbol of morality, a symbol of a lady being faithful, and in love. And again, he has a canon of beauty that was then derived from classical motives. Okay, now so this was the episode 4, and we have one more to go. Thank you for following again all this. This is a little longer than I planned to be, but I hope you appreciate that. And then next Sunday, we're gonna see the final years and Raphael legacy. So especially the work as an architect, and there's still a let's see, there's still a few Madonnas left, and the beautiful lodges as well. We don't have that many paintings really left, but really, yeah, there's still a bunch of Madonnas and some other works. Okay, so thank you very much again. Of course, there will be the recordings later on. Thank you. And now I found this little video, this backstage of Raphael exhibition that took place in 2020 in Rome, which was only open, I think, for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And it was a very important exhibition. They were amazing artworks. One of them. Can you hear the music? No. No. I started again. Sorry. If you have any question or anything, let me just start over again. This round. Share. Okay. So this is the backstage of that exhibition, which started with the replica of the tomb of Raphael in the Pantheon, and had some incredible paintings, some brought from Florence. Yeah. Okay, just one thing I forgot. I'm using for as a reference for the chronology this book by Antonio Paolucci. Antonio Paolucci sadly has passed 2 weeks ago, age 84, and he just died. I don't know, he was ill at something, and he was the director of the Uffizi Gallery for 20 years or so, and then became the director of the Vatican Museum for about a decade. Ok, buonanotte, I'll see you next time. Ciao.
Buonanotte.
Buonanotte,
Ciao.
Mario.
Thank you. Thank you,
Grazie
Mario.
mille.
Buonanotte, buonanotte.
Thank you.